The space station floated in the darkness between stars, like a city made of metal and light. They called it Orbital Station Kepler, and it was the biggest place in the galaxy where different species came to trade and talk. Ships from 100 worlds docked at its ports every day. Strange creatures walked its hallways. And today, a human named Jake Morrison was about to change everything. Jake was 34 years old. He had brown hair that was always a little messy and warm brown eyes that made people trust him. He worked for the Earth Alliance as a diplomat, which meant his job was to make friends with aliens and convince them to trade with humans. He was good at his job because he actually liked talking to people, even people who had 6 arms or breathed methane. He stepped off his ship, the Starboard, and took a deep breath of the recycled station air. His assistant, a young woman named Amy Peters, walked beside him. She was a scientist who studied alien biology, and she was very excited to be here. "I cannot believe we are actually meeting the Valorians," Amy said. "They never talk to anyone. They think most species are beneath them." "Then, why did they agree to meet with us?" Jake asked. "Nobody knows. Maybe they finally got bored of being alone." Jake had read everything about the Valorians that humans had managed to learn. They were tall and thin, with skin that looked like it was made of pale blue crystal. They lived for hundreds of years and thought very highly of themselves. They had technology that made human ships look like toys. And they had never, not once in recorded history, shown any interest in forming friendships with other species. Until now. Jake and Amy made their way through the station. They passed aliens of every shape and size. A group of small furry creatures argued about the price of engine parts. A tall being with too many eyes sold food that smelled like burning plastic. 2 robots played a card game at a table in the corner. The negotiation chamber was on the top level of the station. The doors were made of some kind of black metal that seemed to eat the light around it. 2 Valorian guards stood outside. They were over 7 feet tall and wore armor that glowed faintly blue. "Commander Morrison," one guard said. His voice was cold and flat. "The ambassador is waiting." The doors opened and Jake walked inside. The room was beautiful in a cold way. The walls were white and smooth. A long table sat in the middle, made of the same crystal as Valorian skin. Several Valorian aides stood along the walls, watching with purple eyes that showed no emotion, and at the head of the table sat Ambassador Lyra. SAA. Jake had seen pictures of Valorians before, but nothing had prepared him for seeing one in person. Lyra was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with a body that was thin but strong. Her skin was pale blue with patterns that looked like frost on a window. Her hair, if you could call it that, was made of thin crystalline strands that fell past her shoulders like a frozen waterfall. Her eyes were large and violet, and they were the most beautiful things Jake had ever seen. She was looking at something on a datapad when Jake entered. She did not look up right away. "Ambassador Velshan," Jake said, keeping his voice friendly and professional. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with us. The Earth Alliance is honored by this opportunity." Lyra finally looked up. Their eyes met, and something impossible happened. Lyra felt it hit her like a wave of fire. One moment she was calm and in control, the way she had been her entire life. The next moment, every cell in her body was screaming. Her hearts, both of them, started beating so fast she thought they might burst. Her skin began to change color, shifting from pale blue to deep purple. The crystal patterns on her body started to glow with soft light. She knew what this was. Every Valorian knew what this was. It was the bonding response, the ancient biological mechanism that told a Valorian they had found their perfect mate. It was supposed to be rare. It was supposed to only happen with other Valorians. It was supposed to be the most sacred thing in their culture. It was not supposed to happen when looking at a human. Jake, noticed the change in the ambassador's appearance immediately. He did not know what it meant, but he knew something was wrong. "Ambassador? Are you feeling all right?" Lyra tried to speak, but words were hard to form. The smell of the human filled her nose, and it was the most wonderful thing she had ever experienced. He smelled like warmth and earth and life. He smelled like home, even though she had never been to his world. Every instinct she had was telling her to go to him, to touch him, to never let him go. She gripped the edge of the table with both hands. Her claws, which she normally kept hidden, extended and dug into the crystal surface, leaving deep scratches. The Valorian aides gasped. They had never seen their ambassador lose control like this. "I require a recess," Lyra said. Her voice came out strange, almost desperate. "Immediately. We will continue these negotiations tomorrow." She stood up so fast her chair fell over. Without another word, she walked quickly toward a side door, her crystal hair swinging behind her. She did not run, because running would have been too shameful. But she moved faster than any Valorian should move in public. The door closed behind her with a soft sound. Jake stood in the middle of the negotiation chamber, completely confused. He looked at Amy, who looked back at him with wide eyes. "What just happened?" Jake asked. Amy shook her head slowly. "I have no idea, but I think we should find out." The Valorian aides were whispering to each other in their own language. They sounded shocked and scared. One of them, a female with darker blue skin than the others, approached Jake with careful steps. "You should leave now," she said. "The negotiations will continue when the ambassador has recovered." "Recovered from what?" Jake asked. "Is she sick? Does she need help?" The aide stared at him for a long moment. Something in her eyes looked almost sad. "You would not understand, human. Please go." Jake wanted to argue, but he knew when he was being dismissed. He nodded politely and left the chamber with Amy following close behind Dot as they walked back through the station. Amy pulled out her data pad and started searching through files. "The way her skin changed color," Amy muttered. "And those patterns glowing. I need to research this." Jake was not really listening. He was thinking about the way Lyra had looked at him, like he was something precious and terrifying at the same time. He was thinking about how beautiful she was, even when she was clearly in distress. And somewhere in the back of his mind, he was thinking that his life had just become much more complicated. In her private quarters, 3 decks below, Lyra pressed her back against the cold wall and tried to breathe. Her body was on fire. Her mind was chaos. Everything she had ever believed about herself and her species and her place in the universe had just been shattered by a single glance at a human male. "This cannot be happening," she whispered to the empty room. "This cannot be real." But it was real. The bonding response did not lie. It could not be faked or forced or mistaken. Her biology had chosen Jake Morrison as her mate, and there was nothing she could do about it. 3 days passed, and Lyra did not leave her quarters. Counselor Nira Thelvax stood outside the locked door and knocked for the 5th time that morning. Nira had been Lyra's assistant and closest friend for 20 years. They had grown up together on the Valorian homeworld. They had trained together at the Diplomatic Academy. Nira knew Lyra better than anyone in the galaxy, and she had never seen Lyra act like this. "Lyra, please open the door," Nira said. "I have brought food. You need to eat something." There was a long silence. Then the door slid open with a soft hiss. Nira stepped inside and immediately felt her heart sink. Lyra looked terrible. Her normally pale blue skin had turned a dull gray color. The crystal patterns that should have glowed with health were dim and lifeless. Her violet eyes were tired and filled with pain. "By the ancestors," Nira whispered. "What is happening to you?" Lyra sat down heavily on the edge of her bed. You know what is happening. You have seen the signs before, in others. Nira pulled out a medical scanner and ran it over Lyra's body. The readings made her gasp. This is impossible. The bonding response cannot be triggered by an alien. It has never happened in our entire history. And yet here I am, Lyra said. Her voice was weak. Every moment I am away from him, it gets worse. I can still smell him, Nira. I can feel where he is on this station. My body knows exactly how many decks separate us. It is like being pulled apart from the inside. Nira sat down next to her friend and took her hand. The skin was cold, much colder than it should be. Tell me everything, from the beginning. So Lyra told her. She told her about walking into the negotiation chamber, expecting to meet just another boring alien diplomat. She told her about the moment their eyes met and her world exploded into fire and need. She told her about fighting to maintain control while every instinct screamed at her to go to him. It makes no sense, Lyra finished. Humans are not special. They are young and fragile and short-lived. They have no telepathy, no crystal resonance, nothing that should trigger the response. Nira was already searching through ancient Valorian medical texts on her datapad. She read in silence for several minutes while Lyra stared at the wall. I may have found something, Nira finally said, but you are not going to like it. I do not like any of this. Tell me. Nira turned the datapad so Lyra could see. According to these old records, the bonding response is triggered by a very specific combination of factors. Pheromones, electromagnetic signatures, genetic markers that indicate compatibility. For millions of years, only other Valorians had the right combination. And humans have this combination? Lyra asked, not quite believing it. Apparently, yes. By pure accident of evolution, humans produce a chemical and electromagnetic signature that is almost identical to our ideal mate profile. It is like the universe played a joke on us. Of all the species in all the galaxy, humans are the one species most likely to trigger our bonding response. Lyra closed her eyes. Why did no one know this before? Because no Valorian has ever gotten close enough to a human to find out. We avoid other species. We keep our distance. The response can only be triggered by direct contact at close range. Nira paused. Until you walked into that room and looked into his eyes. Meanwhile, on the other side of the station, Jake was dealing with his own confusion. He sat in the small cafe on Deck 7, drinking something that was supposed to be coffee, but tasted like burnt rubber. Amy sat across from him, surrounded by datapads filled with information about Valorians. I think I found something, Amy said. Not for the first time that day. You have been saying that for 3 days, Jake replied. And so far you have found nothing that explains why Ambassador Volshan looked at me like I was the last water bottle in a desert. Amy ignored his sarcasm. Look at this. Valorians have something called a bonding response. It is a biological mechanism that helps them identify compatible mates. Apparently, it is very rare and considered almost sacred in their culture. Okay, what does that have to do with me? I am not sure yet. But the way her skin changed color, the way those patterns started glowing, that matches the descriptions of what happens when a Valorian experiences the bonding response. Amy looked up from her datapad. Jake, I think the ambassador might have imprinted on you or something. Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. That is crazy. She is an alien. A completely different species. There is no way her biology would react to me like that. I know it sounds crazy, but what other explanation is there? Jake did not have an answer for that. He had been thinking about Lyra constantly since that day in the negotiation chamber. He could not get the image of her out of his head. Those violet eyes, that crystalline skin, the way she had looked at him with such intensity. He told himself it was just curiosity. He told himself he was worried about the trade negotiations. But deep down, he knew it was more than that. A message arrived on his datapad. It was from the Earth Alliance Command, asking for an update on the negotiations. Jake typed a response explaining that the Valorian ambassador was temporarily indisposed, and that talks would resume soon. He hoped that was true. Back in Lyra's quarters, Nira was explaining the situation in terms that made Lyra want to scream. The bonding response is not just psychological, Nira said gently. It is physiological. Your body has identified a mate and is now preparing for bonding. Without completing that bond, your systems will continue to deteriorate. You are saying I will die? Lyra asked flatly. I am saying that if this continues, yes. Your body is shutting down because it believes it has found a mate but cannot complete the bond. It is like a disease with no cure except one. Lyra stood up and walked to the window. Outside, she could see the endless stars and the ships coming and going from the station. Somewhere out there was her homeworld, her family, her entire life. The High Council will never accept this, she said. A Valorian bonding with a human? They would rather I die than bring such shame upon our people. Then do not tell them, Nira suggested. Complete the bond in secret. No one needs to know. Lyra shook her head. The bond cannot be hidden. Once it is complete, both partners are changed. Their electromagnetic signatures merge. Any Valorian would be able to sense it immediately. Then, what will you do? Lyra was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. There is a treatment on the homeworld. It can suppress the bonding response permanently. Nira's eyes widened. You cannot be serious. That treatment destroys the ability to bond forever. You would never be able to connect with anyone, human or Valorian. I would be alone, Lyra agreed. But I would be alive. And I would not have shamed my family and my people. Is that really what you want? Lyra turned away from the window. Her gray skin and dim patterns made her look like a ghost. What I want does not matter. Duty comes first. It always has. She walked to her communication terminal and began composing a message to the Valorian homeworld, requesting immediate transport for medical treatment. But as her fingers moved across the keys, she found herself thinking about warm brown eyes and a messy head of brown hair. She found herself remembering the way Jake had asked if she was all right. The genuine concern in his voice that no one had ever looked at her with such simple kindness before. Her finger hovered over the send button. For a long moment, then she pressed it and sealed her fate. Or so she thought. The negotiations resumed on the 5th day, but everything had changed. Lyra walked into the chamber looking worse than before. Her skin was still gray, her patterns still dim. She moved slowly, like every step cost her something precious. But her eyes were clear and determined. She had made her decision. Jake stood when she entered. He had spent the last 2 days worrying about her, even though he told himself it was not his business. Seeing her now, looking so fragile and sick, made his heart ache in ways he did not understand. Ambassador Velshan, he said carefully, I am glad to see you, but are you certain you are well enough to continue? We can wait longer if you need more time. Lyra paused. That question, so simple and kind, hit her harder than she expected. In Valorian culture, showing concern for strangers was considered a weakness. Why waste emotional energy on someone you did not know? But humans were different. This human was different. Your concern is noted, Commander Morrison, she said, keeping her voice neutral. But time is something I do not have much of. Let us proceed. They sat down at the crystal table. The Valorian aides lined the walls as before, watching with cold eyes. Amy sat beside Jake, her datapad ready to take notes. Everything looked the same as that first day. But Lyra could feel the pull between them now, stronger than ever. Being in the same room as Jake made her heart race and her skin flush. She fought to control her body's responses, to keep her patterns from glowing. Jake noticed her struggling. He could see the faint flicker of light beneath her skin, the way her claws kept extending and retracting under the table. He did not know what any of it meant, but he knew she was in pain. "Before we discuss trade agreements," Jake said slowly, "I want to ask you something. And I hope you will be honest with me." Lyra met his eyes. It was a mistake. Looking at him made everything worse, made every instinct scream louder. "What do you wish to know?" "On the first day, when we met, something happened to you. Something I do not understand. And I have been worried about you ever since." Jake leaned forward slightly. "Please tell me what is wrong. Maybe I can help." The room went silent. The Valorian aides stared at Jake in shock. No alien had ever spoken to a Valorian ambassador with such directness, such open emotion. Lyra felt something crack inside her, some wall she had been building her entire life. This human, who knew nothing about her species or her culture or her condition, was worried about her. He wanted to help her, not because he had anything to gain, but simply because he cared. "Your species confuses me," Lyra said softly. "You care about those you do not know. You show concern for strangers. Why? What do you gain from it?" Jake thought about the question seriously. "I do not think it is about gaining anything. Empathy is just part of being human. When we see someone suffering, we want to help. It is not weakness. It is actually one of the best things about us." "One of the best things," Lyra repeated. "On my world, such openness would be seen as foolish. Maybe your world could learn something from us. And maybe we could learn something from you." Jake smiled, and the warmth in his expression made Lyra's chest hurt. That is supposed to be the point of these negotiations, right? Two species learning to understand each other. Something shifted between them in that moment. The negotiations continued, but they were different now. Instead of formal demands and careful diplomacy, Jake and Lyra began to actually talk. Lyra told Jake about the Valorian homeworld, a planet of ice and crystal where her people had lived for millions of years. She told him about their long lives and cold hearts, about a society built on duty and honor rather than love and connection. She told him about her family, who had trained her from childhood to suppress her emotions and serve the consortium. Jake told Lyra about Earth, a small blue planet that humans had nearly destroyed before learning to take care of it. He told her about human history, full of wars and mistakes, but also hope and progress. He told her about his childhood on a farm, about watching the stars at night and dreaming of touching them someday. "You became a diplomat so you could touch the stars?" Lyra asked, and there was something like wonder in her voice. "I became a diplomat so I could meet the people who lived among them," Jake replied. "Every species out here has something to teach us. Even the cold, distant Valorians." Lyra looked away, but not before Jake saw her skin flicker from gray to pale blue for just a moment. "I am not as cold as I appear, Commander. I simply never had the chance to be anything else." The days passed, and the negotiations stretched longer than anyone expected. What should have been a simple trade agreement became something much more complex as Jake and Lyra continued to talk about everything except the reason they were both truly there. Amy noticed what was happening. She saw the way Jake looked at Lyra when he thought no one was watching. She saw the way Lyra's condition seemed to improve slightly whenever Jake was near, only to worsen again when they parted. "You have feelings for her," Amy said one night, as they walked back to their ship. Jake did not deny it. "It does not matter. She is an alien. She is sick with something I cannot understand. And she is leaving soon." "Leaving? Where?" "Back to her homeworld, for some kind of medical treatment." Jake's jaw tightened. "She will not tell me what is wrong, but I know it is connected to that first day." Whatever happened when she looked at me, it is killing her." Amy was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Maybe you should talk to her assistant. That Valorian who has been hovering around her constantly. She seems worried too. Maybe she knows something." Jake considered this. It felt wrong to go behind Lyra's back. But if she was truly dying, if there was something he could do to help, did he not have an obligation to try? The next morning, he found Nira alone in one of the station's observation decks. "Counselor Thelvax," he said, approaching carefully. "I was hoping we could talk." Nira turned to look at him. Her expression was hard to read, but she did not seem hostile. "About the ambassador, I assume." "Yes, I know something is wrong with her. I know she is getting worse. And I think it has something to do with me." Jake took a deep breath. "Please, if there is anything I can do to help her, I need to know." Nira studied him for a long time. She saw the worry in his eyes, the genuine concern, and she understood why Lyra's biology had chosen this particular human. He was kind in a way that Valorians simply were not. "What I tell you must remain between us," Nira said finally. "If the ambassador knew I was speaking to you about this, she would never forgive me. I understand." Nira told him everything. She told him about the bonding response and how it had somehow been triggered by Jake. She told him about the physical deterioration that occurred when the bond was not completed. She told him about Lyra's plan to return home and undergo treatment. That would save her life, but leave her unable to bond with anyone ever again. She would rather be alone forever than take a chance on something she does not understand, Nira finished. That is how she was raised. Duty before desire. Always. Jake felt something heavy settle in his chest. Is there another way? Something that could save her without the treatment? Only one, Nira said softly. But she would never ask it of you. She believes humans could never feel for a Valorian what she feels for you. She would rather die alone than face rejection. Jake stood in silence, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there was a shuttle waiting to take Lyra away from him forever. Somewhere out there was a future where he never saw her again. He thought about duty. He thought about logic. He thought about all the reasons why this was crazy and impossible and wrong. And then he thought about violet eyes and crystal skin, and a voice that sounded like ice melting in springtime. Where is she? He asked. Boarding deck 6, Nira replied. The shuttle leaves in 1 hour. Jake was already running. The response from the Valorian homeworld came 3 days later. It was not good. The High Council declared Lyra a traitor to her people. Her family publicly disowned her. Every title and honor she had earned in her career was stripped away. She was forbidden from ever setting foot on Valorian soil again. If any Valorian ship encountered her, they were ordered to treat her as an enemy of the state. Lyra read the message in her new quarters aboard the Starward. When she finished, she set down the datapad and stared out the window at the passing stars. Jake sat beside her, waiting. He had offered to read the message for her, to spare her the pain, but she had insisted on seeing the words herself. They have taken everything from me, Lyra said quietly. My rank, my family, my home. I am sorry, Jake said, and he meant it. He had not wanted this to cost her so much. Lyra turned to look at him. Her skin was healthy now, a beautiful pale blue that glowed with soft light. The bond between them had been completed over the past few days, a process that had been intense and strange and wonderful all at once. Jake could feel her presence in his mind now, like a warm fire burning at the edge of his thoughts. Do not be sorry, Lyra said. They took nothing that I truly valued. Everything that matters to me is right here on this ship. She reached out and took his hand. The touch no longer felt cold to Jake. It felt like coming home. The Starward set course for the outer colonies. Jake had resigned from his position as a diplomat, explaining that his life had taken an unexpected turn. The Earth Alliance was confused but ultimately accepting. They had plenty of other diplomats. They had never had a human-Valorian bonding before. For the first few weeks, Lyra struggled to adjust to human life. Everything was different from what she knew. Human food was strange, soft and warm, instead of cold and crystalline. Human music was loud and emotional, full of feelings that her people would have considered embarrassing. Human conversations were informal and chaotic, jumping from topic to topic with no clear structure. But slowly, she began to enjoy it. She discovered that she loved human coffee, though she had to drink it cold because the heat was uncomfortable for her species. She discovered that human comedies made her laugh, something she had rarely done before in her life. She discovered that humans touched each other constantly. Casual pats on the shoulder and warm embraces, and that instead of feeling awkward. It made her feel included. Jake taught her about Earth. He showed her videos of oceans and forests and mountains. He played her music from every continent and every era of human history. He told her stories about his childhood, about his parents who had taught him that kindness was never wasted and curiosity was always rewarded. Lyra taught Jake about Valoria. She showed him recordings of the crystal cities that reached toward frozen skies. She sang him songs in the Valorian language, frequencies so high that he could barely hear them, but somehow they still made him cry. She explained the history of her people, millions of years of isolation and survival, and helped him understand why they had become so cold. "We were not always this way," she told him one night, as they sat together watching a nebula drift past the window. "Long ago, Valorians were emotional creatures. We felt everything deeply, but our planet was harsh, and survival required control. Over generations, we taught ourselves to suppress our feelings. We thought we were becoming stronger, but really, we were just becoming empty. Maybe that is changing now," Jake said. "Maybe what happened between us will show your people that there is another way." Lyra was not so optimistic. "My people are stubborn. They do not change easily." But she was wrong. Word of Lyra's choice spread across the galaxy. At first, the stories were told with shock and scandal. A Valorian ambassador abandoning her duty for an alien male? It was unthinkable, shameful, a warning to others about the dangers of contact with emotional species. But as time passed, the stories changed. Young Valorians began to whisper about the ambassador who had chosen love over duty. They wondered what it felt like to experience the bonding response so intensely. They questioned whether their society's rigid rules were actually protecting them or simply making them lonely. Other species told stories too. They talked about the human who had run through a space station to stop the woman he loved from leaving. They talked about courage and kindness and the wild magic that humans seemed to carry in their hearts. They wondered what made humans so special that even the cold Valorians could not resist them. 3 years after their bonding, Jake and Lyra returned to Orbital Station Kepler, the station where they had first met, where a single glance had changed both their lives forever. They were not there alone. A Curry delegation from the Earth Alliance had arrived to announce a new program, the Valshan Morrison Cultural Exchange Initiative. Named after the two people who had made it possible, the program would bring humans and Valorians together for study, work, and partnership. The Valorian High Council had resisted for years, but pressure from their own young people, combined with the undeniable success of Jake and Lyra's relationship, had finally forced them to reconsider. They did not apologize for their treatment of Lyra. They probably never would. But they agreed to allow the exchange, and that was enough. Jake stood on the observation deck, watching the first exchange vessels dock at the station. Human ships painted with Earth Alliance colors. Valorian vessels gleaming like sculptures made of ice. For the first time in history, the two species would work together as partners rather than strangers. Lyra stood beside him, her hand in his. Through their bond, he could feel her emotions, pride, hope, a lingering sadness for what she had lost, an overwhelming love for what she had gained. "Do you ever regret it?" Jake asked. "Giving up everything for me?" Lyra smiled. She had learned to smile in the human way over the past 3 years, though it still showed a few too many teeth to be entirely comforting. "I have told you before. I gave up nothing. I found everything." She leaned her head against his shoulder. Her crystalline hair brushed his cheek, cool and smooth like water flowing over stones. "When I walked into that negotiation chamber 3 years ago, I thought I knew what my life would be," she continued. "Decades of duty and service. A respectable career. An empty heart. I never imagined that a single glance at a human male would destroy all of that and give me something infinitely better." "So you are saying I ruined your life?" Jake joked. "You absolutely ruined my life," Lyra agreed. "And I am grateful every single day." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the ships come and go. Below them, humans and Valorians were meeting for the first time. Jake could see the confusion on both sides, the awkward attempts at communication, the cultural misunderstandings waiting to happen. But he also saw something else. He saw curiosity, interest, the first sparks of connection forming between strangers. "Do you think it will work?" Lyra asked. "The exchange program. Do you think our species can actually learn to understand each other?" Jake thought about the question seriously. He thought about all the ways humans and Valorians were different, all the potential for conflict and confusion. He thought about his own species, with their history of wars and divisions, their struggles to understand even each other. But then he thought about Lyra, about her cold skin that had grown warm to his touch, about her distant heart that had learned to open, about the bond between them, a connection that transcended biology and culture, and everything that should have made their relationship impossible. "I think," he said slowly, "that if we could make it work, anyone can." Lyra looked up at him, her violet eyes glowing softly in the starlight. "You humans are impossibly optimistic. Is that a bad thing?" "No." She reached up and touched his face with cool fingers. "It is the best thing about you. Perhaps the best thing about anyone I have ever known." Jake pulled her close and held her tight. Through their bond, he felt her happiness radiating like warmth from a fire. Across the galaxy, stories were being told about them. About the alien girl who went into heat after a single glance at a human. About the diplomat who ran through a space station to catch his love before she flew away forever. About 2 people from different worlds who had somehow found each other in the endless darkness between stars. But to Jake and Lyra, none of those stories mattered. What mattered was this moment, this place, this person beside them. What mattered was that in all the cold vastness of space, they had found warmth. And that warmth, they knew, would last forever. Far below them. On the station's main deck, a young human man stepped off his ship and walked into a trade negotiation. Across the room, a young Valorian woman looked up. Their eyes met, and the universe smiled, because it knew this story was just beginning. Jake ran through the station like his life depended on it. Maybe it did. Maybe her life depended on it. He did not care about the strange looks he got from aliens he passed. He did not care about the rules of diplomatic behavior he was breaking. All he cared about was reaching Deck 6 before that shuttle left. He nearly crashed into a group of merchants near the central lift. He mumbled an apology and kept running. His lungs burned. His legs ached. He had not run this hard since basic training, years ago. But he could not stop. Boarding Deck 6 was on the far side of the station. By the time Jake arrived, he was gasping for breath and covered in sweat. He burst through the doors and saw a small Valorian shuttle docked at one of the ports. Several Valorian guards stood nearby, loading luggage. And there was Lyra, walking slowly toward the shuttle entrance. She wore a long traveling cloak that hid most of her body. But Jake could see how weak she was, how much effort each step required. "Lyra!" he shouted. She stopped. For a moment, she did not turn around. Jake watched her shoulders rise and fall as she took a deep breath. Then, slowly, she turned to face him. Her skin was worse than before, almost white now instead of gray. Her patterns had stopped glowing entirely. She looked like a statue, cold and lifeless. But her eyes, those beautiful violet eyes, were burning with something Jake could not name. "Commander Morrison," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You should not be here." "I know about the bonding response," Jake said, walking toward her. The Valorian guards moved to intercept him, but Lyra raised a hand to stop them. "I know what is happening to you. Nira told me everything." Lyra's expression did not change, but Jake saw her hands tremble slightly beneath her cloak. "Then you know why I must leave. This cannot be allowed to continue." "Why not?" Jake stopped a few feet away from her. This close, he could smell something sweet and cold, like frost on flowers. "Because your people would not approve? Because it does not make logical sense. Because you are human," Lyra said, and there was pain in every word. "You could never feel what I feel. The bonding response only affects Valorians. For you, this would be nothing more than an obligation, a duty you perform out of kindness. I will not trap you in something you did not choose." "How do you know what I feel?" Jake took another step closer. "You have never asked me. You made assumptions based on what you think humans are capable of, but you never considered that maybe you were wrong." Lyra stared at him. Her eyes were wet, though no tears fell. Could Valorians even cry? Jake did not know. There was so much he did not know about her. "What are you saying?" she asked. Jake took a deep breath. "I am saying that I have not been able to stop thinking about you since the moment we met. I am saying that when I heard you were leaving, something inside me broke. I am saying that I do not fully understand what is happening between us, but I know I do not want it to end." He reached out and took her hand. Her skin was cold, so cold it almost hurt, but he did not let go. "I am saying that maybe, just maybe, humans are capable of more than you give us credit for." Lyra looked down at their joined hands. His skin was warm against hers, so warm it felt like fire. The bonding response surged through her body, stronger than ever before, but this time it did not feel like dying. It felt like waking up. "You barely know me," she said, but her voice had lost its certainty. "We are from different worlds, different species. Everything about this is impossible. So what? Humans have been doing impossible things since we figured out how to make fire." Jake smiled at her, and the warmth in his expression made her heart ache in a most wonderful way. "We crossed oceans in wooden boats. We flew when nature said we could not. We reached the stars when everyone said it was a dream. Impossible is just another word for not yet." The Valorian guards were watching this exchange with confused expressions. They had never seen anyone speak to an ambassador this way. They had certainly never seen an ambassador respond with anything other than cold dismissal. But Lyra was not dismissing Jake. She was staring at him like he had just offered her the universe. "If I stay," she said slowly, "I will be shamed by my people. My family will disown me. I will never be able to return home." "Then we will make a new home," Jake replied. "Together. The bond, once completed, cannot be undone. You would be connected to me forever. Your electromagnetic signature would merge with mine. You would sense my presence always, feel what I feel." "That does not sound so bad," Jake said softly. "Being connected to someone forever, feeling what they feel. Is that not what humans call love?" Lyra made a sound that might have been a laugh or might have been a sob. The color was returning to her skin, shifting from white to gray to pale blue as the bonding response recognized that its chosen mate was near and willing. "Your species is insane," she said, but there was no criticism in her voice. "Probably," Jake agreed. "But we are also stubborn and hopeful and really, really good at making impossible things happen." Behind them, the shuttle pilot announced that departure would occur in 5 minutes. Lyra looked over her shoulder at the vessel that was supposed to take her away from everything she had ever known. Then she looked back at Jake, at his warm brown eyes and his kind smile, and his hand still holding hers despite the cold. "I have a counteroffer," Jake said. "To the trade negotiations." Lyra blinked. "What?" "The Earth Alliance offers full access to our agricultural technology, our entertainment archives, and our diplomatic support in the outer territories." Jake's smile grew wider. "In exchange, the Valorian Consortium agrees to an extended cultural exchange program, starting with their best ambassador spending 1 year aboard a human vessel." "My vessel, specifically?" "That is the most ridiculous trade proposal I have ever heard," Lyra said. "I know, but I am told I have a talent for ridiculous proposals." The shuttle pilot announced 2 minutes until departure. The guards looked at Lyra expectantly, waiting for her decision. Lyra thought about her family, who had never understood her. She thought about her homeworld, where she had always felt alone even in the crowd. She thought about the future she had planned. Empty decades of duty and service with no warmth to break the cold. Then she thought about Jake, about his kindness and his courage and his absolutely crazy belief that two people from different worlds could somehow find something real together. She let go of his hand, and for a terrible moment Jake thought he had failed. Then Lyra reached up and removed her traveling cloak, letting it fall to the floor. Beneath it, she wore a simple dress that showed her crystalline skin, now glowing faintly with returning light. "Tell the shuttle to leave without me," she said to the guards. "I will not be going home today." The guards stared at her in shock. "But Ambassador, the High Council expects you. They have already prepared the treatment facility. Then they will be disappointed." Lyra turned back to Jake, and for the first time since they met, she smiled. It was a small smile, uncertain and hesitant, but it was real. "It seems I have a cultural exchange program to negotiate." Jake felt something warm bloom in his chest. He returned her smile with one of his own. "Welcome to humanity, Ambassador Velshan." "Lyra," she corrected. "If we are going to do something this insane together, you should probably call me by my name." "Welcome to humanity, Lyra." She took his hand again, and this time her skin was not quite so cold. Behind them, the shuttle departed without its passenger Dot, and somewhere across the galaxy, the Valorian High Council received a message that would shake their society to its foundations. Their youngest and brightest ambassador had chosen a human over her own kind. Nothing would ever be the same.